I'd like to introduce our MC for the event today, Arthur Aidala. He is Fox News' legal analyst and a founding partner of Aidala, Bertuna, and Kamins.
Good morning, everybody. Don't hold the Fox News part against me. I know what room I'm in. If I was in Wyoming, I'd get a standing ovation, but it's a different story here. I see a lot of familiar faces out there. There are two that I would like to acknowledge publicly. My law partner, Judge Barry Kamins, who's in the back, who's been very supportive and is allowing me to do this today. And as a lawyer, one who goes to court quite often, there is a legal celebrity in our midst. She was one of the best and the brightest and the greatest judges ever to sit on New York's highest court. Judge Carmen Siparic is here. So very quickly, when I was asked to participate in this event, and I'm a big supporter of City and State, of course, it's basically the first thing I read in the morning when I wake up. When Richard Schwartz asked me to participate, I said, you know, Richard, the corporate social responsibility aspect is usually something that bigger firms, bigger entities partake in, because smaller businesses, and sorry, Judge, but we are a small firm, we don't have the luxury of just saying to an associate who we're paying a significant amount of money, oh, this whole year you're going to go work on this case, don't worry about anything else. It's just not the model that would work for us. And Richard said, well, come on, I don't believe that, Arthur. I'm sure there are things that you do or you have done that you're giving back to the community. And yes, usually, unfortunately, that takes the place of a client who gives us an initial retainer and then stiffs us on the rest of the retainer, and we finish up his case, and that's my idea of doing pro bono work. But, and quite frankly, that happens all too often. But I will tell you a quick story, and we have an unbelievable group of people here, and I very much personally look forward to hearing the panel discussion, because the people there are the highest caliber in their respective fields. It was 2009, and I had just signed my first big non-criminal client. He was Tiki Barber of the New York Giants. He had just retired, and he was going to go into all these different businesses. That didn't go too well. But anyway, fooling around with your intern is not a wise decision for anyone who wants some free legal advice. But he's a good friend, and he's back on his feet now. But I was all excited to, he's doing great. He married the intern, they have a child together, it all worked out well in the end. But I was walking, it was a Sunday, and I was very, very busy at that point in my life. And it was just my son, who was, I believe, 2 at the time, maybe younger, and I'm in the stroller with him, walking with him, and my phone starts ringing, it's vibrating. And I say, look, I am not answering the phone. It's Sunday at 11 o'clock in the morning, like, leave me alone. And we're walking, and we're in Bay Ridge, and we're on the water, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful day, and the phone is zzz in my pocket. Finally, I give in, and I answer it. And it was actually a friend of the Global Strategy Group who's a friend of mine, and he calls me, where are you? That's always a problem. I'm in the park with my son. I have a case for you. I go, all right, Scott, can we do this later? No, you have to do it right now, because they're looking for the person right now. And it turned out to be that case lasted for 2 years. The topic is a little rough for if you're still eating your breakfast, but it's 100% true. There was a young woman from Queens. Her name was Bridget Harris. Her name is Bridget Harris. And if you heard about the way she was raised, it would bring a tear to your eyes, as it did to many of the jurors who sat in judgment of her. She, from the age of 3, at 3 years old, she has distinct recollections of being in bed and the door opening and her father coming into the bedroom. And she assumed her father was coming to tuck her in. And instead, he exposed himself and said, okay, sweetie, I need you to put this in your mouth and pretend it's your bottle. And that type of behavior went on for 18 years. She was beaten on a regular basis. She was sexually abused on a regular basis. The opening statement that eventually had to be given to a jury was so graphic that it did bring tears to some of the jurors' eyes. When I was called to get involved with this case, I was reading about it simultaneously in the New York Times, and basically what happened was, and when I met Bridget, I'll never forget, she was in a hospital in a location where they put people with mental disabilities, and I'll never forget, she had a white sheet, and she was as introverted as someone could be, as much as someone could crawl into themselves. That's what I saw. And I brought our law partner, Mary Ann Bertuna, and we sat, and she really wasn't talking. But over the course of 2 years, we developed quite a strong relationship. And eventually, what came out and what she testified to was that she had suffered this abuse at the hands of, it wasn't her father. It biologically was her father, but it was a monster. That's how she referred to him. And she was able to escape him for 5 or 7 years, 7 years. And all of a sudden, she walks into her sister's house one day, and there he is. And on his lap is her 5-year-old niece. And her post-traumatic stress disorder comes flooding back. That's what you call a trigger. And oh my God, that's what he used to do to me before he did the horrible things to me. I have to stop this. I have to stop this. And her and her sister got into a huge fight. For the first time, they confronted each other's horrors about when they were children. Even though they both knew what was going on to each other, they had never addressed it until that moment in the kitchen of the sister's house. How could you let him go near your daughter? How could you let him do to her what he did to us? She eventually went inside, Bridget, and said to the man, her father, I'd like to get together and speak with you. And he said, well, I won't be around for 2 weeks. She said, okay, fine, I'll see you in 2 weeks. During that 2 weeks, Bridget did all kinds of research on incest and rape and the effects it has on you. She also did research on how, if you harm someone in a certain way, whether it would cause them death or not. All of that was on her computers, which was all presented to the jury. Her father came over one morning on a Saturday, and she confronted him. She confronted him with the research and the damage that is caused to anybody who's subjected to what she was subjected to. And she tried to do it in a very scholarly, academic way, and he denied everything. He's like it never happened. Now this happened in her life till she was 18. It wasn't just when she was a little girl. And a physical fight ensued. And Bridget was prepared. She had, at the time, was working at the airport as a security agent, so she had pepper spray. So she pepper sprayed her father, and he wound up on the floor, yelling and screaming. And she handcuffed him in the front, because she had handcuffs from her job. And there he was, the man who had caused her, who ruined her life. This is a young woman who never heard the words, I love you, in her life. And there he was on her floor, and yelling. So she took a towel and put it in his mouth. And then she proceeded to cut off his private part. She had researched the Lorena Bobbitt case and the John Bobbitt case, and a lot of research showed on her computer that he would not die. And in fact, she was correct. He would not die. She then immediately calls 911 and leaves the apartment. She calls 911 3 times to make sure he gets help. The problem was the towel in the mouth gagged him and he couldn't breathe, so he died from asphyxiation. And the Queens District Attorney's Office wanted her initially to do 20 years in jail, then 18 years in jail, then 15 years in jail. And they acknowledged the abuse that this woman went through her whole life. And they said, well, that was the consideration they were giving her from 25 years to 15 years. And I actually called Tiki Barber and some of my other high-profile clients. I said, listen, this is a kind of a heavy case. The subject matter is very sensitive and could turn people off. I said, are you guys okay with me taking on this kind of case? Because it's going to be in the newspapers, it's going to be on television. And everyone was so supportive. They were like, absolutely, Arthur, you need to do this. And my law firm, we spent 2 solid years working on this case all the time. And we did something like crazy, really. We stood in front of the jury and we admitted everything from opening statement. Yep, she did it. This is why she did it. This is what happened. And she's going to tell you what happened. And Bridget was on the stand for a full day, and you could have heard a pin drop throughout the course of the whole day, because this was a person who had never been told, I love you, in her whole life. This was a person, when she broke a plate at 10 years old because she was doing the dinner dishes because she was told to, and she broke a plate, she was beaten until her skin was opened up, and then was told to take the red pepper and pour it into her own wounds. The jury came back. They found her not guilty of all the top counts. They found her guilty of the lowest count. And Bridget is now in the Carpenters Union, surviving, thriving. She's writing a book, and she's doing so, so well. And that case probably only cost me $50,000 out of my own pocket to represent her. But I will tell you, it is one of, if not the proudest moments of my legal career, because that's why I did become a lawyer. I became a lawyer to help people, to do good. And in the small law firm that Barry and I have in Brooklyn and in Manhattan, we are able to help individuals who really need help. And I will tell you, Bridget Harris was a woman who really needed help. And you're about to hear from many other people who have the ability, they have the size and the depth to help people a lot more than my little law firm can. But I guess my point is, if our little law firm can go to those efforts to help another human being, then each and every one of us in some capacity could do the same. We are going to call up the panel right now as they also receive their awards. Our first honoree is Bill Silverman. He's a shareholder at Greenberg, and he is the award winner for special leadership for all-around excellence in corporate social responsibility and the law. Congratulations, Bill. Next up is Angela Spencer James. She's a principal at Ernst & Young. Angela is also here to accept an award for lifetime achievement in corporate volunteerism, philanthropy, and organizational development on behalf of Kate Barton, Ernst & Young's Vice Chair for Tax Services. Mark Landis is managing partner at Phillips Nizer, and he is going to receive the award for distinguished achievement in legal and community service. Mark was also nice enough to share his family with us. They're sitting over there. Hi, everybody. Aren't we proud of Dad? Yay for Dad. Eric Mower, Chairman and CEO of Eric Mower and Associates. He will be receiving today's award for outstanding lifetime achievement in sustainability, corporate volunteerism, and business ethics. And last, but certainly not least, our host this morning, David Birdsell, the Dean of Baruch College School of Public Affairs. So, how many people on our panel are lawyers? Even if you're not practicing law on a full-time basis, you got that little JD thing. So we got 3 out of 5. So at least there's 2 legitimate people on the panel. Mr. Silverman, a huge law firm like the one that you're in. It's time to do your pro bono. You're in charge of the pro bono division of your firm, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't you tell someone who's from a real small mom and pop type of law firm how a huge entity like yours goes about giving back to our society?
Well, that's a broad question. I don't have a story to match yours.
I'm trying to throw you a softball here, Bill.
Not sure I ever want to do pro bono again after hearing your anecdote. So we do have a massively large law firm. We don't require our attorneys to do it. We strongly encourage them, and we have a very strong participation rate. I think the challenge is to try to make a real impact with pro bono. So I think there's always pressure to measure success by the number of hours, but I think you have to measure success by the impact. So what we try to do is to try to find projects and opportunities for our attorneys to get involved, to work across offices, and then try to actually change something beyond just the individual cases. So we do a lot of work in family courts around the country. We do a lot of work to combat human trafficking. We do a lot of work in the immigration area. And our latest opportunity for our attorneys is to help with the unaccompanied minors who are crossing the border from Mexico. And there are really two, and I'll stop in a second, there are two fundamental areas of a lack of due process, I think, in this country. One is family court, where they're starved for resources and 80% of the people are unrepresented, and immigration court, where you are not entitled to counsel, even if you're a child. So my 16-year-old or 13-year-old can't sign a contract, right? They don't have the legal ability to do that, but if they find themselves, God forbid, in immigration court, they can represent themselves, and that's ludicrous. And so issues like that, I think a big firm or even a small firm can make a big difference.
So I guess the question I have, Bill, is how does somebody know your services are available? I mean, there's a woman and she's a victim of domestic abuse, of domestic violence, and there are custody issues. How does she know to go to your tremendously successful and law firm, which has got to be so intimidating for people who are in that situation? How does she know, oh, I could go and these guys are going to help me out?
The truth is people don't go to my law firm. What they do is they'll go to an organization like Her Justice, MFY Legal Services, Human Rights First, organizations that we partner with. And then we use them to screen cases, to supervise cases, to train our attorneys. And as much as I would love to, take all cases of all people around the country, obviously that wouldn't work. There's a real crisis in civil legal services in this country, and there's much more need than there are pro bono attorneys available to meet that need.
So, Angela, translate that from the legal world into the world that you live in.
Thank you for having me. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say this feels like a little homecoming, because I used to be an adjunct professor here at Baruch, so I feel like I'm being welcome home. So at Ernst & Young, we have a long tradition. Can you hear me if I didn't? Can you still hear me? Okay. We have a long-standing tradition of building a better working world. We changed our value on our tagline about the early 2000s, but I would tell you that we've had that long tradition for as long as I can remember. I've been with our firm since the early 1990s, and I'm a direct beneficiary of what the firm does to basically build a better working world by building better business models. So your question with regard to how would someone know what E&Y can do? Well, often they don't, so we have to go to them as opposed to expecting them to come to us. And so in that vein, we have a strong tradition of reach out not only locally in our various offices across the country and across the globe. And what does reaching out mean? We spend time in high schools that serve underrepresented constituents. Here in the city, we spend time at Stuyvesant. We have a very significant program called the MAP program, where we spend time in high schools that serve underrepresented constituents, helping them understand the value and the benefit of being, what it would mean to be part of an organization such as E&Y. But even more than being part of us is what do we give back at large to the community. We have a very extensive program where we take professionals who are client serving, and when you take client serving, we do pro bono, we just don't call it pro bono. We will take individuals who are basically line contributing professionals and send them abroad for a year or two to help small businesses build their business model. And what we recognize is that this is not just about building a better firm for E&Y. It truly is about building opportunities across the country and across the globe for individuals who would otherwise not have it, but for having a big name. Small, you can do small and you can do a lot with big. Doesn't really matter what your size is. What matters is having engaged people who really want to drive that mantra of building a better working world. I'm a member of the National Association of Black Accountants, and their mantra is lifting as we climb, and that is Kate's mantra. She uses it every time she does a speech, and that is, as you climb, you owe it. you owe it to have your hand, as you go up with one hand, you owe it to have a hand reaching down, bringing up those who otherwise would not have access. And that's sort of how we do it at E&Y.
I think that's a fantastic motto, lifting as we climb. And that probably is a great summary of what this panel and what we're here to discuss. Eric, you have a very diverse business, so I'm curious to hear, and you won a special award today, so I'm curious to hear how you managed to keep social responsibility in the forefront.
We are a diverse business, and you hearing this? We are a diverse business, and our people are very diverse. We have 8 offices, different cities, different communities, and in the advertising and public relations business, you'll find probably more variety of personalities than you will in many other industries. So for us, being involved in community, doing good things is not a matter of our picking out some particular purpose that we should focus on, although we do. Across all of our offices, we try to take issues such as hunger in the community. That's one that no one in any of our offices would feel opposed to. On the other hand, when there are issues that are matters of choice, literally or figuratively, we don't take those kinds of issues. What we do is ask our people to go out in the community, find things that they care about. It can be Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, Red Cross, United Way, church groups. It can be educational, it can be health related, and be active in those efforts. And what we're looking for really is a behavior on the part of our people that will add something to the world in which they live, and which gives them experience in leadership, because they will develop leadership skills. First board I served on when I was 23 years old was Junior Achievement. And as a kid, I learned a lot there. So we feel that there's a benefit to the organization, there's a benefit to us, but more importantly, it creates a culture of giving. And it's best understood, I think. I read a column that David Brooks wrote about 10 days ago in the Times, and he reflected on the difference between a resume and a eulogy. And it's a very interesting way of looking at it, because if you focus as an individual in your professional career on your resume, and it comes at the expense of your eulogy, not that you care or should care about what people are saying after you're gone. I wouldn't in that sense. But what I would care about is whether or not I left a difference, a better difference. And so we view in the company those behaviors as indicative of whether or not we want to advance them in our company, whether or not they'll take the kinds of ownership, stewardship, care, and reflect the kind of judgments that our clients need. Because if you don't care about the world, you're not going to care about clients, and therefore you're not going to care about your work. So it is a self-fulfilling prophecy of good.
That was excellent. Sorry, I didn't want you to stop. Now I see why you're in the business that you're in. We can talk afterwards about you branding me. Bald is beautiful, something like that. Brains and bald maybe is better than beautiful, or something like that. David, you're very differently situated than your co-panelists. Take it away.
That's some open running room.
Richard told me you're brilliant, you're great, and I don't really need to prop you, so take it away.
Well, let me start by congratulating all of the awardees today, both everyone on stage with me and everybody in the room. Inspiring examples of great work. I could talk about a sort of social responsibility commitment out of the university space, but I'm not going to do that today. I'd like to talk as an observer of corporate social responsibility and some of the impacts, and I think the consistent emphasis that you have heard to my left on assessing what you're actually accomplishing, rather than necessarily just how you can talk about what you've accomplished or measure hours invested or whatever it might be, becomes really important. 3 things that I think are critical, and 2 of them you've already heard about today. Partnership. This is hard for people who need service to see. They aren't going to think about going to a major law firm, a Fortune 100 firm. This is just not within the scale of imagination. So forging effective partnerships, typically, though not exclusively, through the nonprofit sector, through educational programs, et cetera, becomes critical. And it's also a way to get to the sustainability piece, which is my second S here. You've got to think about how these efforts are sustained. Whether they're sustained because you're changing business models, whether they're sustained because you are recognizing the passions of people who work in your firm, whether they're sustained on the scale of impact, it's very important to recognize that those organizations that channel people in need to your doorstep are organizations that also need to be nurtured. So the partnerships have an intrinsic value and an intrinsic merit that's very, very important. And finally, scale. How is it that you push this through individual cases, admirable, wonderful, worth doing by themselves, of merit, of service, and of accomplishment, and actually turn it into something of a production model, where we can begin to think about, in a way that's really meaningful on a sector-wide basis, how you're helping with regard to immigration services, food sufficiency, nutritional sufficiency, or whatever area you plan to be involved with. Those are critical commitments. They're kind of at the meta level here, and that's where we college professors are always happiest being.
Eric. Wait, before I go back to Eric, let me go to Mark. Mark, again, you're in a big law firm. How do you determine how much you can give, and where do you draw the line of, okay, obviously we're here to run a business, we're supporting hundreds and hundreds of families with our law practice, and yet we want to help people who need help. So how, as a managing partner, do you figure out, okay, we're going to devote this percentage of resources there and the other percentage there?
Well,
you are the managing partner.
I am the managing partner.
I did my Google research last night.
It is a challenge because Phillips Nizer is not a large firm. We don't operate on the size of Greenberg Traurig, for instance. You're probably 1,000 lawyers?
1,800.
1,800 lawyers. We're 60 lawyers. So, our footprint is not global or national. We're focused on the tri-state area. But the same issues that the professor raised are exactly the issues that we focus on when making these kinds of decisions. We describe them a little bit differently. We focus on sustainability, but we consider it in the context of engagement. What is going to interest our attorneys, and the balancing act between taking on cases where we can work closely with individuals, but at the same time focusing on whether or not we can have a longer-term impact. Certainly when you can work with a particular individual or family, there's a greater sense of fulfillment, particularly to a younger attorney, and giving them a taste of being able to see, yes, I was able to help this person and we were able to accomplish something. But in the end, our community partnerships are most key. And I'd be remiss without a shout out to my friends at Community Free Democrats who are at a table over in the corner. Because a lot of opportunities to help people come from intrinsic connections that I and my colleagues have in the communities that we live in, the communities that we serve. So we frequently will partner with elected officials and with nonprofits. So in one of our matters, we worked with Legal Services of New York, but we also worked with members of the State Assembly like Linda Rosenthal and Dick Gottfried, who said, this is something too big for us to handle just in our office with our small staff. This is an area where you can have an impact. And we do try to find the cases where, if it's a litigated matter, we're looking at something where we might be able to advance the condition of the law a little bit, where we're not going to just be solving one problem for one person, but where either through appellate decision or through legislative action, we can improve things.
So I think after hearing all the panelists, we're all on the same page. I would like to address, especially the two attorneys, but all of you, and what your thoughts are. And I won't put Judge Siparik in a bad position because she's not on the court anymore, but what you should know is that for lawyers, every 2 years we have to register again with the state. to make sure our license is up to date. And one of the requirements is you have to take 24 hours over the course of 2 years of continuing education, 24 hours worth of school, basically, to make sure you're up to date on the current state of the law. One of the proposals that the Court of Appeals has been floating around very heavily, and it's a big fight, to use the accurate word, between the bar associations and the judiciary at the highest levels, is they want to make, or they're talking about making pro bono work mandatory. Mandatory, not it's not on a volunteer basis. So the way I sign an affidavit every other year, saying that I have done 24 hours of continuing legal education, I would also have to say I've done X amount of hours of free legal services, and I forget what the number was, because it's been going back and forth. And for those of us involved in bar associations, it's the topic. So I was wondering if what Bill and Mark in particular, who run big firms or bigger firms, 60. I have 6. You have 60. So you have a big firm. But, it's one thing because you want to do it. It's another thing that you have to do it. And I'm wondering what your position is on that. First, you two.
It's
Bill.
not my position.
Okay, sorry. I know you're.
It's every lawyer's professional responsibility to do pro bono. Now, does that mean every lawyer does it? No, but I have no problem if there's a reasonable mandate among lawyers. I think it's a very reasonable proposal. And I think you have to look at it in context. In this country, we really do have it, and I don't want to come off as a crazy liberal. I like Fox News. I read the
That's only because you like Megyn
I'm
Kelly.
in a wine club. But we have 2 legal systems. We have one for those who can afford counsel. That one works quite well. You can hire my firm. We're in 33 different states. And then there's a second legal system for those who can't afford counsel. And that's best demonstrated in the family court and the housing court. In New York State family court, there are 750,000 new filings every year for 150 judges, and 80% of the litigants are unrepresented. That would be unacceptable in any country in the world, but in a country that's based on due process and equal protection, it's absolutely unacceptable. So a modest pro bono requirement among lawyers seems like a very reasonable response to what is a growing crisis in this country.
Mark?
I agree completely with what Bill said. Even the concept that this proposal is out there is a great motivator when we encourage people to participate in pro bono, and I remind them, well, it's probably going to be mandatory soon anyway, so you might as well get geared up and in practice. We're going to all be doing this every year or every 2-year cycle and be proud of it. But it is not only a professional responsibility, it's a civic responsibility. We have the privilege of receiving a law license. It is earned obviously through education and through taking an exam, but we're licensed by the state, and we're licensed because we're part of a legal system. If you think back to what life was like before the legal system, the proverbial, one cave person beats up another cave person to fight over who's going to, get the mastodon steak, or to grab a spouse because they decide, caveman 1 decides he likes cave woman 2 and is going to take her away. We have a legal system to prevent that kind of thing from happening. But a legal system is a societal compact. And we don't have a societal compact to justice unless everyone in society has access to justice.
Can I just add something?
I was actually coming to you, Angela.
I'll
What
let
I
you
was
ask.
wondering, the question I wanted to ask you, Angela, is if you didn't work for the huge international firm you did, and you decided you were going to have your own small little boutique accounting firm, and I'm just wondering how you would feel if you were told, when you're starting your new firm, and you have all of these costs and expenses, you were told you had to do 12% of your annual work for free.
Well, I will concur with the 2 gentlemen before me. I'm actually the recipient of charity. And I think it's our social responsibility, regardless of where we are as attorneys. And what's interesting, I am an attorney at an accounting firm. And we also have to do our CLE, our continuing legal education. And I actually am quite intrigued and interesting to see how this is going to work its way through, because I do not think that we get a pass as attorneys just because we're not out in a big firm. I believe that the requirements that we give back, they're absolutely, I think they're non-starters, and we should all acknowledge that we have the responsibility. And for me personally, since I am the recipient of some real charity, and I won't give you my full story, but the abridged version is, I come from a working class, project living, didn't know anything about college, really, really tough upbringing. I would never have thought I would be sitting here amongst these gentlemen. I would have never thought I would have had this journey but for the charity, pro bono, that was bestowed upon me. And so maybe I'm biased in this because I know what it can do for the lives, a personal story, what it can do for a person's life to give back. So
David, what I want to ask you is, by the way, that's a great story. David, what I want to ask you, and obviously I'm playing the role of devil's advocate here to keep the conversation lively. You do not have the ability right now to tell one of your professors that he or she has to work beyond what their contract tells them to do for free, correct? You don't have that power.
I deal with tenured faculty. I can't tell them anything.
Right, okay. Now here's the hard question. Do you want to have that power? Do you want it to be that the dean of a City University of New York institution has to dedicate or has to assign X amount of hours or X percentage of time of professors to do free work?
Well, let me respond more broadly for the university and academia as a whole. And this is a long conversation that, don't worry, I'm not going to go into all of it. But universities have to prove value propositions, and they prove that predominantly in the way that they educate students and send them forth into the world to live successful lives and lead successful careers. That's all great. But universities also have to invest in neighborhoods. Universities also have to make sure that people who may not have been inclined to even think about going to university are aware of and able to unlock their own talents and come to university and become better contributors to happy lives and happy communities and great careers, and of course great tax bases, which is of concern to a great many of us. I'm very proud that at the School of Public Affairs we do a tremendous amount of what you might think of as pro bono work, but out of the academic wheelhouse. We offer every single one of the programs that we do on the academic degree-bearing side on a non-credit basis to people who may not be able to get into one of our academic programs, they're competitive, but who can benefit from the kind of insights that can be brought from a top-notch faculty working in public policy, working in public administration, and working in educational administration. So I very much, I'd like not to have to force people to do it, but I want to hire people, I want to reward people, I want to celebrate cases in which people are making these commitments in the community and making the university a more powerful and active element of our social fabric.
So Eric, of everyone here, you don't really fit into any kind of box, right? You know, the lawyer box, the accountant box, the educator box. Could you give us a little, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I'm just trying to have you educate us, just some examples of what a company like yours does or can do in the community to common folks who need some help?
Well, I'd like to say that we're exceptional in our industry in that we do a lot of pro bono work, but that wouldn't be true. Because our industry, as a matter of fact, is known for agencies across America in both public relations and advertising in being very generous with pro bono work. Why that is a curiosity. It's partly because we can do great work. Often in a pro bono instance, you can do work that a corporation may not approve. You can go off the edge a little bit and have some real fun. But more importantly, I think it's the fact that our industry attracts people who care. I think it's exceptional that you would find an agency in America of any consequence that does not care about the people in their community and the issues that surround them. And so when we look at our communities, we can do a number of things. We can do real pro bono work, a campaign. We can say to Meals on Wheels or whatever community organization, we're going to do a campaign for you, and we're going to absorb all of our time. We're going to find suppliers who will give you free printing. We'll get the paper donated, et cetera. We can do that. We can place people on boards, and we do. At very young ages in our organization, we take people and find the junior achievement that would work for them, put them on that board. Of course, that board, that organization will facilitate work through that person. We'll support that board member. We'll often make the contribution that that young person in our company may not be able to make to meet the minimum that the board requires. So we'll do that. We ask those board members to also do other things. We ask them to integrate that organization into ours in a variety of ways, facilitate their well-being. We've got a lot of connections in any given community. We have connections across the country. So we can take a not-for-profit by the hand and lead them into situations that might be helpful to them. We can provide other things. Our public relations group provides crisis counseling and issues management. So we can have a hospital, a not-for-profit that has, obviously a not-for-profit, that has a serious crisis issue, wrong side surgery. These things happen. We'll provide support to that hospital. So there are a variety of ways that an advertising or public relations company can, and excluding things like digital website work, things like that, can be very helpful to a community organization. It's very easy to do. It's a lot of fun to do, and when we encounter someone in our organization who's reluctant to do it, it certainly gives me pause as to what they're all about, and it makes me want to think more about their role in our company. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but
You did. I want to throw the hot potato back in Bill's lap. You didn't hesitate when I asked you about it being obligatory
Right.
for lawyers to have to do this, as opposed to what Eric is just saying. You see who wants to do it and who doesn't, and you evaluate them by how they react to it. So if you feel so strongly about lawyers doing it, mandatory, having to do it, then who else should have to do it? Should doctors have to do it? Should my mechanic, who there are plenty of people who need a new muffler or whose car doesn't start, should the plumber who has to get bonded by the state, should he have to say before he goes and gets his new license, I fixed the lady, the older woman who didn't have heat in her house in the wintertime, and I went in and I did it for free? How far do we go to making it something we do here because we're having a nice breakfast in a beautiful room and we want to talk about, or something that the government starts saying, you have to do this?
I think that's with all respect, it's a completely false comparison for the following reason. Only lawyers can practice law. You need a law license. We have a monopoly on the legal system. And as a result, and my firm included, we charge rates where only a very small fraction of this country can afford counsel. So we talk about legal services for the indigent, but we really should be talking about legal services for the middle class or people with limited means, or even the upper middle class. Very few people in this country, if they have a serious legal problem, serious civil legal problem, right, can afford counsel. So in that situation where there's a monopoly on the legal system, where people
Well,
can't
Bill,
afford
with all
counsel,
due respect, I think you can say the same thing about a plumber. I mean, if you have a woman who is on, an older lady, a senior citizen who's on some sort of restricted budget, and a pipe bursts in January, and she doesn't know to call 311, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not a plumber, you're not a plumber, you don't have a plumbing license, I don't have a plumbing license. Why shouldn't a plumber who has a big, huge, multi-million-dollar business have to, every year when they register, do some pro bono work?
So if you fix your own plumbing, and
I would never
I
even
don't
try
necessarily
to fix
recommend it, you're not committing a crime, right? If you
Right, but if you represent
practice
yourself
law-
pro se, you're not committing a
If you
crime.
practice law without a license, right, that's a violation.
But you can represent yourself.
When we're talking about,
I'm just giving you a hard time.
well, when we're talking about the safety and security of families,
It's Fox News. We're fair and balanced. I got to go both ways here. I got the Democratic table looking at me.
when we're talking about rights and responsibilities and the safety and security of families and children, I do value that higher than I would value the plumbing in someone's home. And I think it really also goes to the essence of us as a country. We're based on the idea not of equality, not that we all have the same amount of stuff, but equality of opportunity and equal protection under the law. Those are fundamental principles of this country which the reality is really quite different. And it's quite different because people don't have the ability to exercise these rights. And so I would say that you should take the opposite position and make sure that everyone's rights are protected. And then whatever happens.
But I am, Bill. I want to make sure the woman who doesn't have heat, I want to make sure her rights are protected. I want to make sure the single parent who has to get their kid to school and their car isn't running and they need a new muffler and they could go somewhere and they should be protected. Those are real issues that we face in society all the time. My only point is, I have no problem doing it for lawyers, but then let's spread the generosity around a little bit. I don't, what's wrong with that?
Slippery slope arguments are always easy. With your proposal, it sounds like you're almost ready to advocate socialization of all businesses.
Well, I mean, that's a little bit of the direction we're
But there's
heading
a
in.
difference in magnitude between the demands that somebody who is unrepresented faces and what it would cost to meet them, which is typically thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to protect their interests in the marketplace, versus the proverbial plumber example where you're talking about something that is probably a couple of $100s.
You see my plumbing bill.
They make it up on volume. I think there's certainly a strong case to be made for physicians to have a similar commitment to attorneys in terms of giving back. You'd want to make sure that your physicians who are providing pro bono medical services haven't spent too much time in academia and forget how to open up a patient. But certainly at the professions level where there is a genuine shortage of providers in certain geographic areas or where people are priced out, there's a need for this kind of commitment. Pro bono doesn't mean for free, is the other thing to keep in mind. Pro bono is short for pro bono publico. It's talking about what is done for the public good. And attorneys have a particular advantage and a particular responsibility because of the common law system, where the things that we do may lead to precedents that will benefit many, many other people in addition to the case that we're working on at that moment. And that's why it seems logical and sensible for attorneys to step up and take on that particular burden.
Well said. Before we close, which I've been told we have to do, being brought up in a very strong and proper Sicilian household, I have to give the woman on the panel the last word. If you have anything else you
If
want
it's
to
going
add.
to be contentious, I might just walk off of here right now.
Is there anything you want to close out with, Angela?
Well, I did want to acknowledge that I'm here sitting in the stead of America's Vice Chair of Tax, Kate Barton, and I would be remiss if I didn't do that and give a couple of words on her behalf. Kate was the first female to be made a tax partner in her office, and we're a big firm. We have 200,000 people globally. She currently manages a practice that spans it's like 13,000 people. And what I can tell you, and I probably would not be at the firm still if it was not for what we can do from a public perspective. And at Ernst & Young, I probably would not have be at the firm still. Kate just wanted me to share a couple of words with you. She has been a strong proponent of diversity and inclusiveness within our firm and women. And I did mention her mantra already, but I think that as we all sit here and we grapple with doing the right thing, I thought about the question that you just asked, and it was quite provocative, and I started to think a little bit about it. What I think is we have a responsibility to use, if we have a platform, we have the responsibility to use it for the betterment of others, leaving this place a better place than what we met. And I don't have impact over plumbers, and I don't have influence there, but I know where I do have influence. And to the extent I've been given a platform, I have a responsibility to use it in the benefit of others. That's all I'd like to say.
I'd like to thank the whole panel. Hopefully, the first award today goes to Ken Bialkin, who is without a doubt, one of the pillars of New York's philanthropic and professional communities. He's also one of the great mergers and acquisition lawyers of his generation, having helped orchestrate some of the most complex business transactions of recent decades, including the merger of MetLife and New England Mutual Life and the creation of Citigroup. At the same time, he helped build Skadden Arps into one of the world's great law firms. Here's just one example of his many good works. As chairman of the American-Israeli Friendship League, Ken works at the forefront of promoting ties between the two nations based on their shared beliefs in freedom and democracy. The non-sectarian, non-partisan organization works with Americans of all faiths and cultures. Ken is quoted as saying, "I've always tried to be an activist, but never a crusader. Socially conscious, but never purely political. I think every citizen who has the opportunity should do what he can to improve the world." Well said, Ken. It is now my honor to present Ken with the Chairman's Award.
I'm very grateful to be included among the other honorees tonight. I'm truly impressed, awed, in fact. I don't really deserve any particular recognition, but you've shown me something that people should know. I've asked to say a couple of words, but I always remember the story of the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Disraeli, when he was once approached by a backbencher, a young member of the House of Commons, who was about to make his maiden speech before the House of Commons, and he asked the Prime Minister whether he thought he should deliver that speech, and the Prime Minister said that he thought he should not deliver that speech because it was far better that if after he gave the speech, people wondered less about why he did not speak, but more about why he did. And so the only thing I want to say is I've had a long and blessed life with many good fortunes and the privilege to work with many colleagues who understand the secret that the satisfaction and pleasure from the efforts and experience of trying to improve the social societies far exceed the burdens and frustrations we encounter along the way. In other words, I never met anybody who did work in the public side and do something for somebody else who did not get more pleasure out of it and more satisfaction out of it than from the giving of it than for any other reason. And so I just want to thank you for recognizing my efforts to help a bit, but I'm truly awed and impressed by what I've heard and what I see of the rest of you here. And I'd like to take my hat off to you and to the sponsors for taking the trouble to recognize what you do. And so thank you very much.
His thinking on the subject of corporate social responsibility is based on a simple but powerful premise. Before a corporation considers how to use its assets for social and philanthropic causes, it must first focus on creating those assets, which means generating capital, generating jobs, and then training your employees for the future. In other words, Mr. Foster preaches the gospel of sustainable job creation. Over the years, at McKinsey and at Yale University, Dick has taught hundreds of companies how to succeed by embracing change, embracing technology, and at the same time, staying true to their responsibility to prepare their employees for a constantly changing economy. If they don't, they will fail, both as businesses and as social enterprises. According to Dick, addressing these issues is a matter of good business and good values. The two are mutually reinforced. As he says, focusing on social impact is not only ethically important, It is just basic common sense. I'd like to present the Lifetime Achievement Award to Dick Foster.
Thank you very much, Arthur. It's a great and enlightening pleasure to be here today. I've been really impressed with everything I've seen today. I thought I had a sense of what was going on in social responsibility before I got here, and I realized I had no idea. So congratulations to all of you for all the great things that you do. I do, as Arthur said, I do believe that the corporation's first responsibility is to return capital for future generations. If we ask ourselves, do we want our children to have more or less capital per person to use for their futures than we have had, my answer is more. And that's a tough job, as it turns out, given all our other responsibilities. So to me, that's number one. Number two, though, to do that, obviously corporations employ people, and we have a real need in this country to employ more people. And there is only one place where that really can happen at scale, and that's at U.S. corporations. So I think we have the obligation to find a way to bring people into corporations. If they're not adequately trained, then we must find a way to adequately train them, and then to prepare for the inevitable changes in the future. Just a statistic or two. I am a professor after all, so I got to give you some numbers. Back in the 20s, if you looked at the S&P index and asked how long would a company stay on that index in the 20s, the answer was 60 to 70 years. So that you probably joined a company that your parents had worked at and your children could expect to work at. Today, that number is 15 years. So if you joined a company that's on the S&P, you probably won't retire from that company while it's on the S&P 500. It's going to go away, and it goes away because of M&A in general. So the economy is changing much more rapidly now. The training burden is much higher now than it has ever been in the past, and our corporations must do that, and we're not doing as well as we ought to. So that's the training and employment. Healthcare, as we all know, is the nation's and the world's largest industry. And healthcare can start in the workplace. And the way we eat, the foods that are available, the exercise, the notion of total lifetime healthcare that our corporations sponsor is another major leverage point. Johnson & Johnson, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, has just committed to invest $1 billion in obesity prevention in the United States, which they say is a condition which will undermine the economy 15 to 20 years from now if we don't do anything. Another great example. Where better to do that than in the workplace? So I think those are very important things. I'm very honored, and I must say quite surprised by this very nice recognition. And I wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you.
Stacy Slater has represented scores of indigent clients who might otherwise not have had access to the legal system. Stacy has won asylum on behalf of individuals from Ecuador, Tibet, Sudan, the Republic of Congo, and Colombia. Anything else? Did I forget some more? Gambia, thank you. And she's helped victims of domestic violence secure U visas, providing them with a pathway towards U.S. citizenship. At the same time, she oversees Nixon Peabody's massive pro bono program, where the firm's 700-plus attorneys each average more than 62 hours of pro bono work a year. According to Stacy, pro bono work also provides the benefit of giving younger attorneys the opportunity to gain hands-on experience. She calls it, quote, a true win-win because indigent clients get quality representation and young attorneys get the opportunity to work with clients on important cases that give them not only important professional experience, but also a true sense of pride in the contributions that they can make as attorneys. Stacy, please come up and accept the award for outstanding achievement in protecting the rights of at-risk populations.
Thank you. I was told that music will start playing if I exceed my 2-minute allotment, so I will be brief. Thank you very much for this wonderful honor, and I'd like to congratulate all of the other honorees. I feel very fortunate to work for a firm, Nixon Peabody, which has such a strong commitment to corporate social responsibility, and in particular to our pro bono initiative. I'd been litigating commercial disputes when I decided to take on an asylum matter. I was inspired by my client, a young man who had been beaten, imprisoned, and tortured by his government in the Sudan. I couldn't believe what he went through, all because he opposed the oppressive regime in control of his country. We helped him to win asylum in the United States. It was very rewarding, and our client was so appreciative of our help. Not long thereafter, I proposed to my firm's management that they create a new role for me, one as our firm-wide pro bono partner. They readily agreed, and I've been in that role ever since, handling and supervising pro bono matters and managing our firm's pro bono program. Critically, from the top down, our management encourages each of our lawyers to donate at least 60 hours of pro bono annually. We believe, as you've heard from our panel, that we have an ethical responsibility to use our skills to give back, to help those who cannot afford counsel to gain access to justice. We also, as you just heard, recognize that pro bono matters can provide excellent hands-on experience, especially for our younger lawyers. In addition to immigration work, which has been my personal focus, we've also helped countless veterans and veterans organizations with a variety of legal issues, including disability benefits and trust and estates matters. We've taken the lead on precedent-setting matters in the LGBT community. We're involved in efforts to reduce gun violence, and we've handled many, many matters on behalf of victims of domestic violence and indigent children. In short, CSR, and pro bono specifically, is very important to me and to my firm. There is such a big need out there, so it's vitally important that the legal community continue to support pro bono initiatives. I'm honored to be chosen for this award. Thank you.
I have a tremendous amount of pride, and I'm actually honored to present this award because just by coincidence, it's going to three still relatively young men who I've known since 1997 when I ran for New York City Council. And despite doing everything that Jeff Pollack told me to do, I lost by 108 votes. Probably the best day of my life, but that's another story. I didn't realize it then. John Sylvan, who I consider a dear friend, Jeff Pollack, and Jeff Plout, who you've probably seen in the movies, because Jeff's appeared in a lot of movies as of late. They started the Global Strategy Group in 96, am I correct? 95. So I went to them in 97. They still were trying to figure out what they were doing, but whatever. And they are now really the creme de la creme for what they do. Political consulting and polling and general consulting, they really are the best of the best. And I can say that from personal experience. I'm very proud of my relationship with them and my friendship with them. And I know, because I see it with my own eyes, that they do give back to the community in several ways. They have working relationships with Oxfam America, the Vera Institute for Justice, the New York State Department of Education, and the MacArthur Foundation, to say the least. I will tell you, if you need them and you call them, you're going to get a phone call back. They will be supportive. They will be as helpful as they can. They will give you as much free advice as they can until it gets ridiculous. John Sylvan carries around a daily portfolio, so he makes sure everyone gets called back and all his emails get answered. I'm very proud to call up the Oscar Award, the winner for Best Picture, John Sylvan, Jeffrey Pollack, and Jeff Plout. They are getting the award for Distinguished Corporate Achievement in Education, Philanthropy, and Community Service.
Thank you, Arthur. Much appreciated. Good morning, folks. On behalf of Jeff Pollack and Jeff Plout and all of our employees, I want to thank City and State and CUNY for recognizing the organizations that invest in CSR. CSR matters. CSR inspires us, and more importantly, it inspires our employees. CSR reminds us what's important, and it keeps us grounded. And CSR allows us to communicate our values and our culture to our employees, our clients, and the community. We are so fortunate to have some of the best and brightest and most ambitious people working with us every day. And it's our obligation to make them proud of our firm. And frankly, if we don't walk the walk and make them proud, they will go somewhere else because CSR is that important to them. Giving back, being a good corporate citizen, is what they expect and what they demand of us. We are proud to underwrite work each year. This year, as Arthur mentioned, we were delighted to recognize the Vera Institute of Justice and to work with them to highlight issues of mass incarceration and issues of criminal justice reform and all of the great work that they have been doing for many, many years. We are also proud to give annually to dozens of organizations to honor our people and the issues that matter to them most. But fundamentally, these organizations and all of the groups today are the ones that deserve our respect and our appreciation and our thanks because they make this city and this state and this country better because of the service that they provide to others. Thank you.